In the earlier lesson, we were doing front-end code, and we ran into the dreaded Coors error when we made our request. So there are some advantages, definite advantages of using back-end requests and then simply calling through to them from the front end. And since we already have nodes set up, why not? And we can also look at how we can manipulate some of the data so that we can have a drop-down, maybe make our selection of all the different available cryptocurrency names instead of having to type them in manually. So it should take care of that as well. And we can do a lot of the heavy lifting here in the back end. So let's set that up. And app get, we need to set up our routes. So let's create some routes. So price, and we're going to pass a parameter for the currency. So this is what we're trying to do in the front end. And I'll show you how to do this within the backend code. And then all we have to do is just link to price currency, and we can pull back that data and that information. Then obviously make use of it within our web content. So first of all, let's console log out. And remember, this is backend, so it's going into the terminal. Request parameters. And let's, we're restarting there. So let's see what happens when we go to that price, route, and Bitcoin. So we see that we're passing the parameter currency Bitcoin. Perfect, exactly what we needed, because now we can set that within our URL route when we're making our request parameter. So let's set up a constant, or we can set up a let. And basically this is going to be the currency value. So we're going to check to see if it exists. So we can do currency value. And first, let's check to see if request parameters exist and current. And if it does exist, then we're going to use request parameters current. And if it doesn't exist, then we'll just do a default of Bitcoin, because we know that that one exists. So we can see that, or we can grab the path from over here. So we can also set up const URLs. And we'll just do ticker like that. And I'll update these to const as well. So we did that on the front end, so let's just be consistent. So we're requesting the URL. So we've got a URL name that's coming in over here. So let's add current value to that URL. And we have the backslash there, so we can just simply add that in as a route. So we're going to get ticker, and then the Bitcoin is going to be set dynamically. And let's just add in that backslash so that that's our request path. And then let's set up our function. And we're going to check for errors. We're going to get our response data. And also let's get our body return back. So that's our request object. And now we need to make use of that content that's being returned back there. And for now, let's just JSON that out. So there we go. So we're returning it within a JSON format, and we're getting all of that information. And actually, I'm going to update this from price, because we're going to make use of the price afterwards. So we'll call this crypto. So crypto Bitcoin will now return back that Bitcoin value. And we can also make use of this now in the front end. But let's first set up a few more routes. So we want to also we see that we've got this value always in US dollars. So in case the user is not coming in with US dollars, this is where we can do price. And this is going to be relatively the same thing, where we're simply going to return back a value. And let's return back all the values. We're not going to do a single one. We'll return back all of the values. But this time we're going to use currency. So to update the currency, and we're going to get the request parameters and the currency as well. So just as we did before, but this time it's going to be US dollars, Canadian dollars, whatever the international currency is. We'll set it as US dollars, USD. And we'll try that out as well. So instead of ticker, or actually Canadian is CAD. So see that we're returning back price CAD. There's also euro, so we can return back the euro price. So you can try that out. And you can see that it returns it back price euro as well. What we're doing is we're adding this string value. So we've got the URL plus this string, and then plus the currency value. So let's try that out. So go back out and refresh and go into the price and refresh it. So there we go. So we're able to return it back in Canadian dollars as well. And we're simply outputting it within a JSON format. So these are the routes that we're setting up. And then there's one more route that I wanted to set up and also want to show you some of the usefulness of doing it within the backend, because we have the ability to, so initially we want to load all of that content and we want to load only the names of the available currencies. So we're going to loop through all of the returned values that we're getting back here within our output, and we're going to get all of those IDs, and we're going to drop those IDs into an output, a JSON output that we're going to output to the page as well under the route of load. So let's set that up. So request, response, and let's set up our request. So the request is going out to the URL, response, and body. So let's set up a default array, so just an empty array. Let's get that data. So we're going to JSON parse that data. So parsing body into usable JSON object so that we can loop through it. So let's set up a basic loop. So var I equals 0, and then we're going to iterate through data while I is less than the length of data, and increment I by 1. That's our loop. So now we can build out our array, and then this is what we're actually going to output. So data, and as we're looping through the data items values, when that request finishes, instead of sending through that data, we're going to return back the JSON value of holder. So this is that temporary array. And I just thought that I've got response res there, so I need to change that value, so response. So there we go. So now when we refresh it, it was just because I had res here and I'm getting another response there, so I was using that same variable. So now we see that we get all of those values being output here. And let's add in one more thing, and this is going to be just a really quick fix that I'm going to add in a prototype to capitalize. So going down, because I want to actually capitalize this content before I'm pushing it in. So I've got ID and use capitalize. So that way, all of them are capitalized. So we've got Bitcoin, Ether, Ethereum, Ripple, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, all of them are capitalized. And we're ready to move on to the next step. So go ahead and set this up and set up all of the routes, and you're going to be ready to go back to the front end, and this way we can just make queries into the routes that we've set up. We see that they're all working within the browser because they're all GET requests, so we're not doing any posts, and we see that we're outputting the content as needed within our page, and then next it's just a matter of grabbing it from our front end code and then making use of it within our web page. So that's all coming up next.